I still remember that night with a strange clarity, the kind that stays with you long after everything has changed. Because it was the moment when the quiet balance of my life shifted in a way I never expected. My name is Laura. I'm 38 years old, and for the past 6 years I've been married to Daniel, a kind but often distant man whose demanding job keeps him traveling more than either of us would like. When I married Daniel, I also became a stepmother to his son Ethan, who was just 16 at the time. Ethan was shy, thoughtful, and much more mature than most boys his age. But despite living in the same house, we had always kept a respectful distance from each other. It wasn't awkward exactly, just careful, like two people trying not to cross invisible lines. Daniel left for another long business trip that autumn, something that had become routine in our marriage. The house felt unusually quiet without him, and most evenings I spent my time reading in my room or watching television in the living room while Ethan stayed in his own space, busy with college applications and late-night study sessions. For weeks, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. But one evening, something happened that I still think about whenever I try to understand how easily ordinary lives can drift into complicated emotions. It was nearly midnight when I finally decided to go to bed. The rain outside tapped softly against the windows, and the house was wrapped in that deep silence that only comes late at night. I had just turned off the lamp when I heard a soft knock on my bedroom door. At first, I thought I imagined it, but then the door slowly opened and Ethan stepped inside. The hallway light framed his silhouette, and for a second he looked hesitant, like he wasn't sure whether he should be there. I sat up, confused and slightly worried. "Ethan, is everything okay?" I asked. He closed the door gently behind him and stood there for a moment before speaking. His voice sounded different, heavier somehow, like something had been weighing on him for a long time. He told me he couldn't sleep and needed to talk. That alone wasn't strange. Teenagers sometimes need someone to listen, but there was something about his expression that made the moment feel more serious than I expected. I invited him to sit on the chair near the window, and the dim light from the bedside lamp cast soft shadows across the room. Ethan started talking slowly at first, explaining how the past year had been difficult for him. His father was always traveling, his future felt uncertain, and he often felt like he had no one to truly confide in. As he spoke, I realized this might be the first honest conversation we had ever had since I married his father. I listened carefully, trying to be supportive without overstepping the boundaries that had always existed between us. But as the conversation continued, I noticed something in the way he looked at me, an intensity that made the air in the room feel heavier than before. It wasn't inappropriate, but it carried an emotional weight that I hadn't expected. Ethan admitted that over the years he had come to rely on my presence more than he realized. With his father gone so often, the house would have felt empty without someone like me there. Hearing that touched me in a way I didn't anticipate. Being a stepmother is complicated. Sometimes you wonder if you truly belong in someone else's family story. That night, for the first time, Ethan spoke as if I did. The conversation stretched longer than either of us realized. The rain outside grew louder, and the clock beside my bed moved quietly past midnight. Eventually, Ethan stood up, looking calmer than when he first entered the room. He thanked me for listening, something he had apparently wanted to say for a long time. As he reached the door, he paused for a second and turned back, his expression thoughtful. "I'm glad you're here," he said simply before leaving the room. The door closed softly behind him, and the house returned to silence. I lay awake for a long time after that, staring at the ceiling while my mind replayed the conversation again and again. Nothing dramatic had happened, nothing that would shock the outside world, yet something inside me had shifted. The careful distance we had always kept between us suddenly felt different, replaced by a complicated awareness of how lives intersect in ways we don't always expect. When Daniel returned from his trip a week later, everything seemed normal on the surface. Ethan went back to focusing on school, and I returned to the routines of daily life. But that quiet midnight conversation had changed the way I saw our small household. It reminded me that families are built not only through blood or marriage, but through the fragile moments when people choose to open their hearts to one another. Even now, when I hear rain tapping against the windows late at night, I sometimes remember the moment my stepson walked into my room and how that unexpected conversation revealed emotions we had, both kept hidden for years. It wasn't the scandalous story people might imagine from the title, but it was something deeper, one of those rare nights when honesty breaks through silence and leaves you seeing the people around you in a completely new way.